MeshCloud just bears a huge potential for organizations, right? It has changed the way software is developed. It has become much faster. We have much shorter release cycles. What we wanted to do as MeshCloud is to really be that enabler, to really enable organizations to access this technology, to use that technology. And also, if we look at large and maybe more traditional organizations, right, to adopt the processes that are required in order to really reap the benefits.
Welcome back, listener, to another exciting episode. In this episode, we are going to be discussing about MeshCloud. And it is like a very exciting product. You can like do a lot of things in that. There are like identity management, security and compliance, multi-cloud. So there are a lot of things in that. So to discuss the product in detail, we have invited Christina. She is the co-founder of MeshCloud. So a warm welcome to Christina and kindly introduce yourself and what you have been up to.
Thank you very much, Huzaifa. And it's great to be here. I'm very happy to share our story. I'm Christina. I'm co-founder of MeshCloud, and I'm responsible for our teams of customer success and growth, so sales and marketing, basically. And I'm really happy to talk with you about how large organizations are moving to the cloud, how they migrate, and what kind of challenges they might be facing on their way.
Okay, that is great because nowadays, everyone is working on cloud and all the companies and all the products, everyone is migrating to cloud. So I just want to know what inspired you to create that cloud management software.
Yeah, so we are three founders at MeshCloud. All of us have a background in business informatics, so we have some business perspective into it, but also a lot of IT perspective, some software engineering perspective. And one of the things that we realized, being at university as well, is that cloud just bears a huge potential for organizations, right? It has changed the way software is developed. It has become much faster. We have much shorter release cycles. Organizations are able to adapt their software to their customers' requirements much better. And I think this is just a super exciting and foundational technology for everything related to digitization in the end. And what we wanted to do as MeshCloud is to really be that enabler, to really enable organizations to access this technology, to use that technology. And also, if we look at large and maybe more traditional organizations, right, to adopt the processes that are required in order to really reap the benefits. Because if you keep your IT organization the way it used to be 20 years ago, and then you put cloud in front of it, things might not really change. But if you change your IT organization to really leverage the speed and the automation capabilities that the cloud has, I think there's great potential. And being close to that lever and to empower really these organizations to build new and digital applications for their businesses, I think that's what excites us and what we want to drive with our solution as well.
Yeah, you have mentioned some great insights because I also remember like back in the days, almost every big organization used to have their own data centers, their own servers. Like even if not a data center, they have this, one or two servers, and then they are connected with the internet, and things are going like that. And then with the cloud, coming in the game, and then everyone eventually moving to the cloud. So for small organization, I think like it is very easy, but with big organization, you can tell more, like because with them, like obviously migrating their old data, and then there's like data engineering is involved and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's not only, right, you have the data center and you have the cloud. You can also do great cloud stuff in data centers if you have private clouds. But what really has changed is all the processes around it. So having the central control plane, which you can really automate, where you can really get on-demand infrastructure and don't have to like fill out a paper form and then wait for 2 weeks and then call and ask like, what happened to my server? Why is it not there? And so on. So this is what is really the game changer for application development and for the speed in which organizations can develop their applications.
Yeah, that is great. And can you tell like some of the issues organization face when it comes to cloud management and migrating to cloud?
Yeah, sure. So, we actually like to split that into four kind of big issues that an organization faces in their or during their cloud journey. And the whole thing starts usually with an organizational challenge, right? You have this new technology, but you have a lot of IT people that might not be familiar with it yet. And then you have to define how are you going to organize your IT and also your cloud, like how are you going to adapt your organization to use that new technology? And that's a really important question that comes in the beginning, because in the past it was clear that usually a central IT department, they would take care of application development. They would also manage the entire infrastructure, the data center, and so on. Nowadays, there's much more application development in like the specialized departments. So if you are a manufacturer, you will have production, but you will also have sales, you might have HR. So you have really different parts of the organization that are involved into application development specific to their area of expertise. So the role of IT is really changing with the cloud. And I think that's what organizations have to understand and have to do as a first step, to think about how can I organize myself to really respond to that increasing demand for cloud infrastructure and for application development, and put my organization into a setup in which it can scale and in which it can really become more digital.
Okay, okay. So with that, my next question is, how MeshCloud, solve all these problems that you have just mentioned?
Yeah. I mean, the organization, right? That's the first problem that comes up. So that's really about how do you structure your org chart in the end and the responsibilities. But after that, of course, there are more problems that a software like ours can address nicely. And the one important thing that everyone, I think, knows about and is worried about when it comes to migrating to the cloud is the topic of security. So if you give more responsibility to developers that are building their applications, if IT scales in general across the organization, how are you going to make sure that your applications will be secure or that your infrastructure is secure? And that's one of the challenges that we also tackle with our platform. So in that area, one best practice, or the thing to do, the way to go basically, is to build a so-called landing zone. So the landing zone kind of pre-configures your cloud environments. It comes with some basic policies that already define kind of a base security layer to make sure that you prevent bad things from happening. So these can be things like, okay, I'm a European company. I don't want my people to deploy a workload outside of Europe. So I can enforce a policy that makes sure that this happens. Or certain services shouldn't be allowed. I can basically enforce another policy that makes sure that certain services are blacklisted within the cloud provider. So in that way, I have a preventive approach to securing cloud environments, and I can roll out these landing zones with our platform mesh stack. And then once you kind of get across the security challenge and you have your setup and people basically start learning how to use the cloud and they start adopting the cloud, at some point, what usually happens is that you do not have enough resources, right? I mean, we know that there's not enough cloud engineers on the planet for all of us. So the question is, how can you make your setup scalable? How can you make sure that your IT is not the bottleneck and that it's not blocking you from actually kind of entering new markets or bringing applications to market? And that's the second part that is really important to us, to tackle this operations challenge that large organizations have. And one of the ways to do that is to provide self-service, right? If you don't have to interact with every application team that is moving to the cloud, you have the possibility to scale much better than if you have to kind of take care of each application individually. So providing a self-service portal is one of the key features and one of the key capabilities our platform brings, and it really enables a smooth way of collaboration between central IT, or central, we call it a cloud foundation team, and different application teams across the organization.
That is good. And as you mentioned about the compliance, because I know like these days there are like a lot of things in the cloud, like new softwares, new tools, and basically just to cope up with that, it is very difficult. Plus, on top of that, like if you're developing in European market, then you have to keep that in mind of the GDPR compliance, like the data protection, all these stuff. Like it can be, very hectic for someone, a data engineer as well. So that is good that your platform by default bootstrap some of the compliance with it so they cannot do wrong. So that is, I would say, like a very useful feature you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important, right, that people think about that early on and that they can come up with a way that doesn't hold them back from actually building applications in the cloud. And I think one of the misconceptions that are often out there in the market is that it might be less secure, but actually the security capabilities of the cloud are very strong. So if you leverage that and if you use it in a meaningful way, you have much better possibilities to secure your applications and your infrastructure than you might have had before in a data center.
Yeah, you're right. And the next I want to discuss is like the concept of multi-cloud is, very intriguing. So I know the Mesh Cloud, your platform, it can handle multiple clouds and all of the different cloud providers integrated into one platform. So can you elaborate that how it actually works?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, multi-cloud has been a topic for many years, right? And in the beginning, it was often about vendor lock-in. So organizations didn't want to be too dependent on an individual cloud provider, so they would come up with a multi-cloud strategy and aim to implement that. By now, it has also evolved a bit, I would say, in the world of IT strategies and cloud strategies. So a lot of organizations actually choose multiple providers for the specifics that they have, like for the specific services that they have in certain areas. And they use these different providers consciously. So they use maybe Google for analytics use cases, and maybe they use Azure for lift and shift use cases, as an example. So providing this freedom basically to teams to choose what kind of technology do they want to use for building their application is a very powerful instrument. Also, to attract talent and also to kind of diversify a bit the infrastructure that you are using as an organization. But as you want to kind of work natively in the cloud and have access to all the services that the cloud providers offer, it's very important to us that we keep that promise, right? We do not want to make every cloud look the same because then these differences, they're obsolete. So our role is really more one of an orchestrator. So we provide cloud environments of the different cloud providers from our self-service platform. We handle the organization in a similar way. So the process of getting a new cloud environment, the process of getting access to a cloud environment, the process of cost management, all of these organizational topics, they should be unified and they should feel the same, because it's actually a lot of work to integrate a new cloud platform into your organizational processes and existing IT systems. So by doing that in a similar way for each cloud and not kind of reinventing the wheel with every cloud that gets integrated, you just save a lot of administrative effort. And it's also easier for the user side, so for the people that actually want to run the cloud applications, because they get this freedom and they know how it works, even if a new cloud platform comes up. So we support, of course. I mean, we reduce a lot of complexity when people are using multi-cloud. But the things we do, they're also relevant even if you are in a single cloud setup, right? So we even have customers that only use one cloud because they still have to integrate this one cloud with their internal IT systems and with their existing processes. But the reality, at least in our customer base, is that most of them, they have multiple clouds, even if they don't want to have them.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And you're right, because like if like we take the multi-cloud part away as well, there are like other things as well, like identity access management. It is very important because in big organization, how you manage that, it is like one thing is like based on the service provider, then it is like based on project wise and team wise. So there are like a lot of possibilities there. So how your product, manages all the identity and access management?
Yeah, so our product, I mean, every organization basically, no matter the size, has an identity management system, right? So we don't want to open up a second one next to the existing, but we integrate into the existing identity management systems. And what we want to enable is that people access our platform, so it's called Mesh Stack, via single sign-on. So that's typical. I mean, every enterprise SaaS product should do that, but they can also access the cloud environments that they are provisioning through our platform. And that's the special part, because in other, like if you don't have a solution like ours, it might take even a couple of hours or even a day until you get access to specific environments. And by enabling a self-service, not only for creating environments or for provisioning certain building block services in that environment, but also for providing access to these environments, that really makes the whole onboarding process more smooth and more seamless, and it helps them to accelerate and not have people wait. I mean, everybody knows it, right? You need access to some system, then you are waiting, you can't really work, and there's a lot of distraction and loss of focus. So basically streamlining that and making sure that people get the tools that they need to work is our mission there.
Okay, so if I go in bit detail, like regarding if you give access from MeshCloud, how does that work? Like you give project, if a new person join in, I give the person access of a certain cloud provider or all the cloud providers or a specific project. Like, can you tell this in detail?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in general, right, when you think about identity and access management, especially in like regulated environments and so on, you try to follow the principle of least privilege. So you don't want to give people too much access in the cloud. So what we have is we have an organizational construct, a project, and within that project, you can have different cloud environments. Like, for example, you have an Azure subscription and a GCP account because you want to try out these two providers for your application. And then on that project level, we also define the access rights. So usually you come up with a role mapping or with standard roles that you want to use in the different clouds. So for example, you have a reader role, you have a user role, and you have an admin role with different permissions on the cloud environment. And these permissions can be handed out via our product. So if there's a product owner that kind of creates a project and then he or she wants to give access to a couple of developers that are also working on the project, they can do that. And then these developers, they will get access only to the specific environment and only in the extent that is required for their work. So that way you have a nice isolation of different environments and you don't have people interfering in other people's projects and workloads.
Okay, that is great. That is great. And my next question is, how MeshCloud makes sure that the whole cloud infrastructure is secure and about the security aspect?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, one of the ways and one of the best practices also for cloud providers. So that's not necessarily specific to Mesh Stack, but one of the ways to secure your cloud environments is to apply the so-called landing zone. So there's different aspects of a landing zone, and we help organizations. First of all, like if they don't have one yet, we help them to build these landing zones based on the best practices the cloud providers offer. And then we also help them to roll out the landing zone. So to make sure that your security setup and your general setup, it's standardized. You don't want to handle every application or every environment individually. You want to have standards because it's much easier to kind of analyze what is going on and to update it also if you know that they're all configured in the same way. So providing landing zones, rolling out these landing zones for specific use cases is one of the ways that you can, or that we enable organizations to secure their cloud landscape. But it's also not always about making it more secure, but actually knowing what you have, right? One of the great security risks in cloud is that you have shadow IT and that there's actually some cloud environments you have forgotten about or you never knew about as a central cloud team. So the idea is that every cloud environment that exists in the organization is captured and documented in a consistent way. So every cloud environment, there is what we call a cloud tenant database, and all these cloud environments are in that database, and you can look up who's responsible for it, what kind of workload is in there. Is it a dev environment? Is it a prod environment? So you have that basic information on the cloud environment to make sure you have a good knowledge of what's going on where in your cloud.
Got it. Okay, so yeah, nowadays in the cloud, there's like a very main topic going on about cost optimization, and because for every organization they are using different cloud providers or different services, and then it is also very difficult to keep track of all of these different providers, and you might miss one bill, and then you lost access to that, and it is very difficult to keep track of it, to pay all of these bills, and to know like what is the accumulative sum of all of that and how we can optimize it. Because if we get the good visibility, everything in one place, then obviously we can think about optimizing it, and like removing unnecessary services. We might spin up those services for some POC, and now we do not need them. So how MeshCloud handles that?
Very good question. I mean, maybe to also put it in a bit of a different perspective, right? Because we talked about security, we talk about cost, we talk about IAM, and you could think like, okay, why do they do all these things in one platform? But in the end, we are always looking into the perspective of an application team, right? What are the topics that they need to have covered in order to build their application in the cloud? And they need the environment, they need the access, they need the security, and they also need to have a budget and to have this transparency on the budget. And that's kind of the last part in the life cycle, that you handle the costs of the cloud appropriately. And one of the big challenges that our organizations and our customers face in that area is that basically they get one large bill, right? They get one bill from their cloud providers. So that can be AWS, that can be Azure, that can be GCP again. They get that bill, but actually a lot of different application teams have used the resources. And if you want to make people conscious about their consumption in the cloud, you need to also make them responsible for what they consume in the cloud. So the idea is that everyone that wants to access the cloud actually needs to have a cloud budget for it. So they get that budget. Every application that they want to run, every cloud environment that they get, they assign a budget to it. And then they are aware that the cost that occurs within that environment will also be charged back to them internally. And that's the way for central IT to really implement an internal chargeback process and to split the costs that come in via the cloud providers into the different applications that are in there. And of course, if you want to make people responsible for the cost, what you have to do is you have to make the cost transparent, right? You have to make it available to them so that they know every month or even every day and every hour of the day, how much am I actually spending for my cloud application? And if you have this information, you can also regulate it. You can decide, I need more, I need less. You can ask for more budget if required. You can turn off some resources if you don't need them. So you really want to have this like a closed feedback loop of, okay, that's what I'm building, that's what it costs, that's the budget that I have, and I can iterate on that and improve on that over time.
As the point that you have mentioned earlier regarding like previously all the software is being used by the IT department, but now like a lot of other teams are also onboarded, like as the point you mentioned about like budgeting, like the finance team can also be on board and see all the budgeting and how much basically each project is taking and stuff like that. So it is very cool, I would say. And I would say like to give the viewers more idea of what MeshCloud is, like it is good if you can give like a quick demo of the product.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. I've prepared a little flow here, so let me share my screen. Maybe one thing before I start. So in general, our product always has two perspectives in it, right? One is the perspective of a cloud foundation team. So the central cloud foundation team that is managing the whole cloud platforms, the infrastructure, and so on. And then the other perspective is the one of an application team. So software developers that actually want to build something on the cloud. And that's that's the two things we cover, and of course the collaboration between them. So let me share my screen. You should be seeing something now.
Yeah.
Perfect. So what we see here is our demo environment, right? And that's the perspective of the Cloud Foundation team. And as we already see, there's lots of dashboards, there's a couple of actions here. So this part is really about having the transparency on what is going on in my cloud landscape. I can see how many cloud tenants do I have. I can see what has the cost been during this month. How are the users evolving? How many projects do I have? I can even look into all these things for more detail. So I have this transparency as a central cloud team. As I don't talk to every individual application anymore, I still know at all times what's going on and who's doing what. And I can also track how cloud is being adopted in my organization. And if there's something that I need to do, I basically have my actions needed panel here, and I can go in and see if something was wrong or if somebody requested something, some quota for something. So I have the overview here. Of course, this overview only comes in, right, once I have integrated my cloud platform. So usually the first step would be I decide what cloud platforms do I want to use. I integrate them. I define the landing zones. I define what we call the tagging catalog. And then I have an offering for my application teams to use. And I think what makes most sense is if we change the perspective into the perspective of the application team, because then we see the results of this initial onboarding and configuration that a Cloud Foundation team would do. So in this case, we are now in a workspace, and the workspace is called the Liquid Mobile App Workspace, because we have a Fantasy Bank, the Liquid Bank, and then there's a team that is developing their mobile app.
Okay.
And such a workspace, it has basically a certain metadata attached to it. So we have a regulatory onboarding ID that comes out of another system. We have an owner, which is Anna admin. We have a confidentiality for which the workspace has been approved in the past. So we have a certain kind of categorization of that workspace.
Got it.
And of course, if I I can basically organize that workspace. I can invite people into it. I can look into my financials. But like one of the key actions that I would do with it is creating new cloud projects, right? I want to create new cloud projects and kind of maintain and manage these projects on the platform. So I think it makes sense. Let's go through that flow. I go here, I create a new cloud project, I give it a name, and then I get asked a couple of questions, and they're also called tags. So that's really that standardized metadata that I want to capture for every cloud environment. And of course, this can be adapted to the use case of every individual organization, but there are certain things that are quite frequent and like standard information you would want to capture. One of them being like, okay, what kind of environment are we talking about?
Okay.
So I would have a development environment, and then I want to have, I have to define what kind of data is going to be used. So I have public data in here. I can define in which business unit that application belongs, right? So we talked about the different parts of the organization that are using the cloud. In that case, I would say it's an R&D application because I want to try out something.
Okay.
And then we have here what we call the landing zone family. So depending on what type of use case I want to build in the cloud, we provide different landing zones. And I say that I want to have a cloud native application in that part. Now, if I go to the next step, that's what I mentioned earlier about the budgets and the cost responsibility, right? I do not get access to the cloud as a developer or as an application team if I do not provide either a cost center or a budget that the cost is going to be charged to internally. So here I get to choose my preferred payment method, and yeah, that's an example now, right? I can have a playground budget of, for example, 5,000 euro, or there's a larger budget approved for a specific application. So in that case, I would say it's a playground budget because it's also a test project here.
Okay.
The nice thing about these budgets is that they are multi-cloud budgets. So you don't have to kind of develop a budgeting mechanism for every cloud platform individually. You just have these budgets or cost centers in there, and then you can spend the money basically on whatever cloud platform you prefer to use.
Yeah, that is also good.
Yeah. Now, is the fun part. Basically, I get to choose what cloud platform do I want to use, right? So we mentioned multi-cloud earlier. Of course, not every organization has every cloud platform available, so it really depends on their strategic decision of which cloud platform they want to go to or they want to go with. In that case, I could say, okay, I want to have an Azure subscription, for example, for that cloud native application. But as I see, I could also choose AWS or GCP. I can even choose two of them if I want to. And then there are a couple of platforms that have this little yellow symbol here that I'm not allowed to use because actually the information I provided earlier doesn't match with what they allow me to do.
Oh.
So that's also a way to kind of integrate certain policies and make sure that people only do what is compliant or what they're allowed to.
Yeah. That is related to the compliance part that you mentioned earlier, that it enforces some compliance, like, okay, great.
Yeah, exactly. So for example, now I said I have public data, but if I say I have confidential data in that application, right, the choice of landing zones and the choice of landing zones and platforms that I can use would have been different. But of course, that's up to, like, we do not force a certain configuration onto an organization. That's up to the organization to build up these rules and define the way they want to guide their application teams. Now that we have chosen the basic platform, so I say, okay, I have this budget, I'm this project, I want to use Azure, I want to use GCP. I go into the next step where I can select the specific landing zone. So here, I now see, okay, I have my Liquid Azure Dev landing zone, and the prod one, again, I'm not allowed to use because I said it's going to be a dev project.
Yeah.
So I will choose that. And then there is what we call the so-called building blocks. So of course, having a cloud environment is a good start, right? But if I want to build an application, there's a lot of other stuff that's like a lot of infrastructure or additional services that I might want to use. So we have this concept of building blocks in our product that allows you to provision certain services into the project and just make it faster for application teams to develop. So in that case, I could say, okay, I have that storage account that will be provided here. I have to provide some information. I have to provide a location for it, so I can say I want to deploy that in West Central data center in Germany, and I have to give it a name.
Okay.
So I can recognize it later. And that way it's a bit like, building blocks or like playing Lego, right? I have my base plate, I have my account, and I can then decide what kind of blocks do I need for my application. Yeah. Behind these blocks, there's Terraform automation usually. So the Cloud Foundation team would define what are the services or what are the building blocks that we want to provide to these teams, and they can integrate the automation, and then it will pop up in this service catalog here on this building block catalog.
Based on your settings they select here, the Terraform is executed and those configurations are deployed on the cloud provider, right?
Exactly. That's for the building blocks, for like creating the actual subscription, providing the access and so on. We also have direct integrations with the cloud. So not everything is based on Terraform. There's also the possibility to do manual building blocks, and but I mean a lot of organizations do use Terraform, so that's an option to integrate their modules here.
Okay.
Yeah, now I go to the next stage. I have my GCP. I can do the same story, right? Again, I chose the dev landing zone. In GCP, we do not have that many building blocks that are provided by the Cloud Foundation team. But I could also say I want to have this Google Cloud bucket here, and then I'm fine. Then I go back and I come into my project access control. So as a product owner, I would want to add myself basically, but I can also go for example, a developer in my team, Daniela developer. She can get a specific role. So maybe she's not only project leader, but actually a project user because she has to build in the cloud. So these roles that we define here, they're then also reflected in permissions in the cloud. And that way I can provide access to that specific environment that is going to be created. Yeah, and that's basically the workflow for creating a new project. I get it here to kind of review and create it. And then if I click on create, it takes a couple of minutes and then the project is there and people can access it. I'm not going to create it now because I think we don't have that much time. But what I can do, or what I would like to do, is basically to show how the access would look like, right? So this was the onboarding flow. I can add my building blocks. Of course, I can also add them later on, so I don't need to do that in the onboarding. But if I actually have created a project, I can always directly get connected to the cloud provider's portal. So I can get transferred into Azure, or I can even directly access Azure if I've been giving the permission. And then I can work natively in the cloud, and I can use all the services that the cloud providers offer to me.
Oh, great. That is good.
Okay. Yeah, of course. I mean, there's much more, right? I would have the financials. I see kind of what my next invoice will be looking like, and so on. And I can really maintain and manage these cloud projects over time. But I think for a quick overview on how all these things play together, then for the application team, that process should be enough.
This financial table is related to that specific project, right? Developed.
Exactly.
Okay. And can you quickly show the like is there any like combined one, like the overall financial, some you can say some sort of stats or table?
Yeah. So basically, I have different scopes in which I see my financial. I can look it up for a specific cloud, like for that specific Azure subscription. I can see it here on the project level. So here I would see kind of the multi-cloud bill. So I can go into that, and I will have my Azure costs, my GCP costs, my service costs. And for GCP, I even have the carbon footprint reported in that statement. So that's kind of the multi-cloud bill that I get, but only for that specific project. Now, if I switch the perspective back to the Cloud Foundation team, of course, I get all the cost information for all projects in my entire organization, right? So I have the financials here as a quick dashboard. Well, but we also have more dashboards to see how does it evolve over time, who's maybe missing a payment method. Also, what are my most important or my most expensive projects, so I can basically go back to them and see what can I optimize there. And of course, I can also export that data and kind of manage it and use it in other systems.
Yeah, great. So it like basically gives the visibility of finance based on whatever role or access you have. You can see the finance according to that. So that is good. And you can also see like from admin side, like what are the main, you can say cloud provider you're using. Like in the chart I saw like, AWS, GCP, which one is like causing more bill and which one is on the lower end. So that is, that is
Exactly. By providing all the metadata and capturing that, right, there's a lot of possibilities to actually analyze the cost and the usage of cloud within your organization. So it's really easy to also export this data. A lot of people, they also kind of merge it with other systems data, and then they build their own Power BI dashboards or Looker Studio dashboards, and they can really process it further and combine it with other data sources so that it makes sense.
Yeah, because like I know like in normal organization, like they need like some sort of team to basically, to handle cloud and to, give access to, okay, this developer, that guy is working on some POC. He needs like full access of RDS, and then, they are processing the request, giving that person access, because as everyone is following least access, principle. So they do not
Yeah.
give admin access. So with that too, like it is very easy, like I would say like even 1 or 2 person can manage the whole organization, different projects and stuff, and then you can have like project managers. They are like further handling their team, and like yeah, it is very intuitive, I would say.
Exactly, that's the idea. We want to like save as many service requests as possible, right? We want people to really be empowered to use the cloud by themselves and to have a small team run a large cloud foundation. That's the idea behind it, because there's not enough cloud engineers, and it makes much more sense to invest like the know-how and the skills that you have as an organization into the actual applications you are building, right? Rather than having all the cloud skilled people in that cloud foundation team, and they only handle the infrastructure but not the actual application that goes to the market.
Yeah, you're right. And can you mention some of like the prominent organizations or products that have like used your product and they are like very happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you can always look them up on our website. What we bring as a value, I mean, we work with some of the largest car manufacturers in Germany, with some of the largest banks. So that's no secret there. And we have some utility companies that also use our platform. So there's a lot of large scale organizations that rely on these services, and that they scale and operate their cloud foundation based on Mesh Stack. And there's two, I mean, the service requests, right? You mentioned that already. So how do you make it scalable, and how can you be more efficient in your operations? But then there's also smaller organizations, like Rheinenergie, for example, a smaller utilities provider in Germany, that they are building up their cloud foundation based on our solution, right? There's a lot of best practices included. So this whole process of coming up with a cloud foundation, of integrating these platforms, of building your landing zone, there's a huge acceleration potential, because it's just, yeah, it's what we do every day, right? So you have a lot of capabilities built in, and I think that's a great benefit for people that are early in their journey, and then later in their journey, it's about saving operational cost and making it more scalable and more efficient in the operations.
Yeah. Yeah. So lastly, training and support is very integral part of success. So could you shed light on how MeshCloud offers to assist different organization and clients maximizing their benefits using your platform?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in general, of course, everybody is invited to talk to us. We can do demos of the product. We also have regular demos in our YouTube channel that you can look into. You can talk to an expert and kind of get more input on where you are in your cloud journey and what are meaningful next steps. But all this know-how and this knowledge that we've kind of collected and experienced in the past couple of years, we've also put it into our Cloud Foundation maturity model. And maybe I can share my screen again for 1 second, because I think that's really helpful. So basically, this is a model that is it's cloud agnostic, and it's also tool agnostic, but it presents all the capabilities that a cloud foundation can develop to manage their cloud infrastructure. Might be a bit small, actually. But what we see is the different pillars here, right? The tenant management, the IAM, the security and compliance, the cost management, and what we call the services ecosystem. And you see different capabilities, and we've also put them into an order. So this is kind of an orientation for teams that are building up their cloud foundation to see, okay, what do I actually need in these different areas, and also how can I build it up? So that's an interactive model. You can go into it. We have, for example, the resource hierarchy here. You find kind of a post that explains what it is and also how you implement it in the different cloud platforms. And you get some more insights about it. And I think that can be really helpful if you are in the beginning, or also if you want to kind of challenge yourself and see, okay, I've done so many things. What else could I do to improve my service as a Cloud Foundation team to my application teams? So that's the Cloud Foundation maturity model that you can get on cloudfoundation.org. And then, of course, there's other ways and tools, like in our website, meshcloud.io, you would also find a lot of white papers and support, like a landing zone checklist. Have you covered everything relevant in your landing zone? And some success stories and so on.
Great. And that is like I would say like great, like for someone who wants to understand more about it, like more about cloud, how to get started, like how to be add more value to it. And you can just go to this link. I can paste this link in the description, and people who are interested, they can visit that and get to know more about it. So
Perfect.
yeah, that brings us to the end of another exciting episode. It was like really great talking to you about MeshCloud, and it is a very exciting product, must say. So I am also planning on using it for like a lot of projects that I am working on in the company that I work for. So yeah, thank you, Christina, for joining in today.
Thank you, Saifa. It was great. And talk to you soon.
Sure. Yeah. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thank you.